And welcome to another Biddle special edition this week, August 10th, 2019. How is everybody doing?
Doing really good.
Doing great, Rocco.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
Fine.
really good, thanks.
Well, this is not just a special edition because it's Biddle Europe, but it's also a special edition because we have the project lead of Endeavor OS with us this week.
Cool.
Brian, how are you?
I'm fine. Thank you for having me.
Well, it is an awesome thing when the community gets to interact and talk to the developers. So I appreciate you being here, man.
Me too.
All right. We did try Endeavor OS, but I think we're going to change it up a little bit this week for the fact that Brian is here. And we're going to basically get his story on Endeavor OS and check it out. So, Brian, why? Okay, let's start from the beginning. Were you a part of the Intergos team before?
No. I was just a moderator on the Antergos forum. And when Antergos, said goodbye, I came up with the idea originally to keep the community together. And it wasn't the plan to make a distro. It was just to make a forum and to keep it together. But then Joe, Fernando, and Manuel joined, and they were so eager to make a distro. And well, here we are.
That is awesome. I think the best part about it is that it started out as a community effort, as something to keep the community together, because that's something that we can all relate to here. This is such a great community. All these guys get together every week. And so that's definitely an awesome thing. So you decided to start Endeavor. What is the goal of Endeavor OS now?
The goal is to, the first step was actually to keep this great community together and to keep it active. I think we accomplished that. But our goal now is to provide users to learn Arch the right way. And I don't mean that elitist or whatever, because it's a very, very bare OS, it's a very bare distro, what we're offering, and we're very aware of that. But this community is so friendly and so active and so eager to help. We're convinced that everyone, if you have the patience, can learn Arch, the Arch way, but with a friendly installer.
Yep. PZ?
Yeah, no, that's I can attest 100% to the friendliness of the community. From the day I learned there was a Telegram group and jumped on there, the reception that you get, whether you're a perceived expert or whether you're a noob, everyone is just so friendly and wanting to welcome you. And then when I found out there was a discourse channel for it as well and jumped on there, it's exactly the same. I don't think I've had one snide remark from anybody in any, what do you mean you don't understand that? Go and read the manual. There's been none of that at all. Everybody just realizes that those days need to be behind us. And everybody, has been really, really friendly. I've really enjoyed my time in both the Telegram group and the discourse. But one question that I wanted to ask you is, and I guess in a way you've already told us what it was, but I was going to ask you what prompted you to pick up the mantle of making a new distro, and you've just said it wasn't. It was your initial attempt to keep the community together.
Yeah.
So was it just the enthusiasm of the other two guys that you think, what the heck, let's just do it?
Yeah, basically yes. And they didn't need any convincing from me. So I jumped in, and I must admit they are way much stronger in coding and programming than I am,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm learning every day because that was actually the thing I was wary of. Because I didn't know, I was afraid to do it. I'm going to be very frank about that one. But Joe and Fernando already had a ISO made called Tergos, and we based it on his work. And that was a very good base to jump further.
Mm-hmm. Now, I also realize it's still very early days yet. But are you having any regrets now that you realize how much work you've got involved in?
No, absolutely not. We love every minute of it.
Awesome.
The thing now that makes it harder for us is we didn't anticipate it on this big media attention, which we're very grateful for. But we're at the moment we're busy to make the online installer, and Fernando and Joe yesterday told me, well, let's release it as a beta. But because of this big attention, and it's much bigger than we anticipated, I said, let's wait. Let's perfect it and let's do it easy. Let's take a breath because what we did was already amazing, but I think the online installer still needs work and perfection.
Well, I think that anytime that you take on doing a distro, it is a huge feat to take on. A ton of work has to go into this, regardless of how much is actually going into it. Just the main bulk of the work is a ton. But Eric, you wanted to ask Brian something?
Yeah. Hey, Brian. Nice to meet you.
Hi, Eric.
I just had a question. So one of the things I see a lot of people complain about, let's say, in the Linux community is that there are so many distros out there and that maybe some of them don't have merit, or maybe they don't see the reason for having so many distros. Now, this is the spiritual successor to what I would consider to be a pretty popular distribution. Have you thought about, in terms of your plans of like a long-term strategy of is this, I think one of the things that really shocked people about Antergos was that so many people used it for so long and then it just very quickly was no longer there. Mm-hmm. And I think some people may have a fear of adopting a newer distribution. There you might have that initial interest, that initial push of people, coming to you and wanting to see what you're doing. I think what you're doing, what you've done already, it has merit and it is something interesting and worth looking at in terms of, plans of future. I mean, and I know this is all really new to you and I'm not asking for like a 5-year, well thought out plan, but is that something you've thought about? And what would you say to maybe someone who would ask that sort of question?
Absolutely. We thought about that. The first days we were talking about this distro. What we didn't want to do, and that was my hesitation at first, because I knew this was going to be a massive undertaking. That we're going to do, let's say, 2 releases and then say, okay, it's too hard, goodbye. Because we didn't want to put the community through that same ordeal. I mean, the Antergos devs were very quiet, certainly the last year. We as moderators, we didn't have any feedback or anything, and we didn't want to do that. So we asked ourselves, okay, we're going to jump into this. What's your family situation? We discussed that. And our plan is to stay as long as we can, actually.
That's great. Excellent. Thank you.
Fabulous. Big Pod, sir, you wanted to ask Brian a question.
I want to have a question about the online installer. I've seen it that it's not ready and all that. What were you planning to use for online installer?
At the moment, we are busy with the net installer from Calamaris. And that is the one we will release early fall. That's the aim.
Okay. Thank you.
But we are also, we still have a sort of, cooperation with Reborn OS, because they are working on a very, very own installer called the Phoenix installer. But it's far from ready yet, because they are building it from scratch. And at the moment, we're trying to expedite it with the Calamaris installer. And maybe we will jump over to the Phoenix installer, but maybe we also will stay with the Calamaris. We don't know it yet at this moment.
Mm-hmm. Just a quick follow-up question on that. The installer, are you just going to offer different desktops, or are you going to offer, well, do you want Firefox? Do you want Chrome? Do you want Office? Do you want FreeOffice? Or are you going to keep it very basic and then teach people to do it the Arch way once they've got their minimal desktop type sort of thing?
Yeah, we're going to only the necessary apps. So it's only the desktop, and you can choose your Broadcom driver if you need it. The NVIDIA installer we already have.
Mm-hmm.
But that's it. No Office suite, no email client, no. Firefox is the only thing that ships by default. But that's it.
Excellent.
All right, Peter, your turn, brother.
Actually, that was going to be my statement, and Zeb and Brian have already grabbed it before me, that there's been a lot of debate over the last week over a certain subject, but I noticed that Endeavour has solved it by not putting an Office suite out. They've solved that whole question.
Yep.
Of which Office suite to use.
So basically, okay, so Zeb had touched on it, but I just want to make it clear. Are you working on part of the installer to allow other desktop environments, or is it just going to be Xfce?
No, it's like the Untitled installer. It's going to be for now the major DEs like KDE, GNOME, Deepin, Mate, Cinnamon, and LXQT.
Right.
OpenBox and i3 will is in the plan. Is in the planning, but later.
Yeah. All right, Derek, you recently did a video on Endeavour. You have any questions?
Yeah, I can't wait for OpenBox and i3. So I'm really excited about that. Well, I won't spend too long on it, but it's basically Arch, right? It's basically 100% Arch once you get it installed. Right now, it's all about the installer. The installer just works. Calamaris installer had no problems with it on physical machines, in a virtual machine. So I always had a problem with that Xfce installer in Tergos. I complained about that for years. And this seems to be 100%, at least on everything I've tried it on so far. So once you get it up and running, you know, it's basically Arch. Arch runs on all my equipment. So I like it so far, what I'm seeing. I don't run Xfce, but that's fine. I can't wait to see what they do. You know, if they have their own customized spins of OpenBox and i3, I'll definitely check those out at some point. But even for now, just getting a quick up and running Arch installation, I think Endeavour makes a lot of sense, because the install process was like 10 minutes on my equipment. So,
yep. So what is Brian, the projected release date for including the other desktops environments? Like, when do you hope that that's ready?
Early fall.
Okay, early fall.
Yeah.
Matthew, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, actually, I guess my comment was that I don't necessarily see the reason for further installers or different desktops, because when I installed it, Endeavour, installing GNOME was really straightforward, and it took me less than 5 minutes after setup to get it up and running smoothly. So I guess it's nice to have those options upon, like, before you install, but Endeavor OS and I guess in that nature, Arch Linux has also done a really good job just making that easier than I expected it to be, just based on that Arch reputation. So,
I mean, I think, Matthew, if I had to just look back at Antergos when I first discovered it, comparing it to all of the other distros that I was using or trying at the time, the fact that they had that online installer and just made it so easy to select, I agree with you. It's not terribly difficult to, you know, Pac-Man, you know, and you know, whatever desktop environment. But it was just such a nice presentation, right? I just felt like that was the essence of that. The theming was sort of its own thing. I wasn't a huge fan of, but the idea that I had one ISO that I downloaded, I boot up, and maybe on this machine I want to have one desktop, and on another machine I want to have another one. It just, that to me was really special, and so that's what I'm looking for. Forward to is that online installer. Not to challenge what you're saying, because I completely agree. I did the same thing.
I agree as well, definitely. Yeah. I guess my question is that going to be like a top priority kind of thing?
And is it going to cause problems? I think part of the problems with the Antergos installer was trying to support 10, 12 different window manager and desktop environments. It's, you know, half the ones I tried to install never worked. If you were installing Cinnamon or GNOME, it seemed like they always worked, but a lot of the other desktop environments, trying to install them, seemed like they were broken much of the time.
Yeah, Kinchi or Sinchi, I still don't know how to pronounce it.
Neither do I.
I think no one. It had its problems, and the original plan was to keep it, but it caused havoc after 2 weeks playing with it. And it can't live without the Antergos specific things they did. And for us, it was very difficult to rewrite it. The problem with that installer, I won't say the name anymore. The problem was that Antergos also had a, well, very large own repo. And it was that repo that wasn't maintained very well that caused, that often caused the hanging of the installer. And we're trying to avoid it by keeping the repos as small as possible. And, well, users have to install almost everything themselves after install. So we're not going to offer customized, like, do you want Office, do you want this, do you want that, do you want that? Because that was the thing that caused havoc for Kinchi.
Mm-hmm. Another question, you said you're going to keep it very plain and very vanilla. Mm-hmm. But I can assure you that is not vanilla Xfce. One of the things I have been hearing is how much everybody likes it, and they go, "Oh, Xfce, is this going to be any good?" And they open it up, and it's like, "Wow!" So, who was the brains behind that? Who's your design person out of your team that got it looking so good?
That's Joe. Joe did that one, and we actually we picked out Xfce because it's easy to maintain. Because, well, the updates. It takes years. I mean, this summer was the last. And for us, that's a blessing. I mean, GNOME and KDE have a new version every 6 months. So that's the reason why we picked Xfce. But we all didn't like how it looked. And Joe said, well, let me do my magic on it. So he came with it. And I think, without exaggeration, he did it all within a week.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Nice.
Mm-hmm. And is he going to do a similar job on KDE, GNOME, Cinnamon, or are you going to leave those plain?
That's the discussion at this moment, because we didn't expect that the look was going to be such a big hit. So yesterday again, we discussed it, and we're going to see, because it's still, I mean, we all have families and our own lives and our jobs. We're doing it. I mean, it's not our full-time job. So, and I know that Joe and Fernando in particular are working very, very much hours at this moment to get it working. So I asked the question, is it manageable? If it isn't manageable, then we're not going to do it. So that's, and I don't have an answer. They didn't answer yet, because the enthusiasm is still there. But is that same enthusiasm also there in eight months? And that's the question I asked them. And yeah, they didn't.
My 2 cents on that is I think that maybe where Antergos sort of lost me was that they felt the need to apply. And I know that I personally maybe didn't appreciate it, but I think a lot of people did like it. That was the feedback I saw. But I do worry about maintaining a consistent look and feel across multiple desktops. I think that's going to be a big challenge. And in particular, I think if you're appealing to the Arch crowd of people who want to tinker and change things anyway, you may be doing a lot of work for people that literally just come in and change it immediately anyway. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with a good first impression, and I think having reasonable defaults, maybe making some changes to things that are glaringly like awful in some of the defaults for some of the DEs. But yeah, I worry that you're going to bite off more than you can chew with something like that.
Well, I think some desktops you have to customize if you want people to be able to use it right out of the box. GNOME kind of needs to be extended to be usable. Yeah. Of course, OpenBox and i3, you can't use them at all unless you got them pre-configured for the user.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
Another thought.
But I don't think there would be an issue on my end if it was just a plain vanilla install of the other desktop environments and you customized Xfce, like the theming and whatnot, to what you wanted it to be, and left the other ones just vanilla as you would install them. I don't think that would be a problem in my book.
Well, and even maybe something like making it a package that you can install, like a theme or something like that was available on those other desktop environments. If it's, Xfce, if you're theming Xfce, that's going to be compatible across multiple desktops anyway. So maybe an idea there.
Yeah. Well, again, it's up to Joe and Fernando, because we also, Manuel is doing the repos and the mirroring. But it's up to Joe and Fernando. And at the moment, they're so enthusiastic that they want to do it. But I think they're I mean, this weekend, the work is very low, and I don't blame them. I mean, it's summer over here. So I hope they will make a good decision also for themselves.
Well, there was a question from chat from Terry, and going back to the actual installer of other desktops, and he asked, have you considered just providing simple scripts to install the vanilla editions of each desktop environment?
Yeah, we consider that. But the thing is, we kind of inherited the Untitled community. And we dropped that idea very early when we were still at the Untitled forum. And the majority of the community wasn't very enthusiastic about that plan.
Mm-hmm. I can see why, because you kind of want to go with the Debian approach, and it actually, it's actually good to teach the users how to install, use Pacman to install all the window managers. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
All right. Any of you other guys have any questions for Brian before we move on to the actual talking about it? Dead air. That was complete dead air.
I was going to say, I was going through the website, and I'm not what you call a fan of Arch. So, but I wanted to,
He is an
explore
OpenSUSE fan.
whatever.
Maybe.
Yes, I am. Anyway, so I was going through there, and the basic. I mean, I don't know exactly who your target audience is. I'm not a Linux noob at all. I mean, 15 plus years now on Linux, but to go from something else to Arch, there's got to be some sort of an onboarding at some point, some kind of a way of channeling or displaying information as such that it's not an RTFM situation. And so I was reading like the basic package interactions, like how to use the package manager, and you have a lot of stuff on there, but not how to search for packages or even how to get software for Arch. Now, if you're in the Arch ecosystem, I got it. You know to go to a certain spot. But let's say someone who's coming into Arch for the first time and they hear that EndeavourOS is a good way to install it easily, which it is, worked great right out of the box. I was very happy with it. I won't install any other DE. Xfce is great. But anyway, there was no way, like, I didn't know, how do I get software for Arch now? I mean, I know how to get software for Arch, but for someone who doesn't know, there was not really a good way of, go here, click here, go run this search command. So that might be like just a little tweak to improve, someone who's not familiar with the Arch ways.
I understand your question. I understand the struggle. But when you install EndeavourOS, there's this screen, and it's also in the live environment. You can click on information for it. And we noticed now that a lot of people click it away, but it actually brings you to the wiki. But we're learning on the job, and we're going to improve that one to make it more obvious that the information is there in front of your nose actually. But a lot of people clicked it away. When I watched Jared's review, he also said, no, I don't want that. And I think a lot of users do that.
That info box didn't show back up for me when I rebooted it, like after installing it. So I didn't have that reference to go back into it. And I was looking at searches for how to, like, software or install, and I didn't actually was able to find it doing searches through the menu. So something to kind of help us folks that are not that don't like Arch. I mean that are not familiar with Arch, kind of go into it. That's just my 2 cents.
And I probably was horrible on that video because I never use GUI package managers ever. I know PAMAC was probably on there, but I pull up a terminal and install and remove everything. So you're right. Users wouldn't know where to go to do any of that. So that's a good point.
Yeah, good point, Cubicle Nate. I had an idea, Brian, is maybe because you guys wrote a really nice FAQ on your wiki about using Pacman, the basics of Pacman. Maybe having that come up after the install.
Well, we're going to improve. I'm going to improve the website and the forum also.
Nice.
Because to make it more obvious that to make the wiki more obvious, but we're going to improve that little menu a little bit more. I think maybe more in your face. I think
it brings to mind 2 questions for me. One is I agree with that balance of like how much do you put up front and how much is just going to get clicked away, but it does make me think. In terms of who your audience is, I mean, you said you inherited the Antergos community. Do you feel like? So I think one of the things that Manjaro gets a lot of criticism for is saying that it's an easy-to-use, beginner-friendly sort of distro, and the reality is that, and I would say particularly with what you're doing with Endeavour is you're saying no, this is really more about getting you up and running, and then it's the archway from here on out, right? And you can decide if you want to use helpers and things like that. That's completely up to you. We're not going to necessarily hold your hand there. So it just makes me wonder, like, what is the level of, upfront sort of hand-holding do you need to do for that audience versus, I think what you're doing is a lot more honest and straightforward instead of, again, I think Manjaro does a good job of packaging and putting things together and making it a little easier for people to get into. But as soon as they need to do something outside of that little comfort zone, it gets particularly distressing, for newer users in particular. So that was my first thought. And the second one was, you just keep referencing like you need to do this, you need to do that, or you've got these the other guys that are helping. In terms of asking for help or engaging the community and building the project, have you had any thoughts on, here's some things we need help with, and reaching out?
We're going to expand the team, and at the moment on our GitHub page there are a lot of community members who are helping at the moment, and we're building this trust level, because that is where the Antergos devs cut themselves in the past by letting people in, and it didn't work out very well. So by contributing on the GitHub page, we're building up a relationship, and then we're going to invite them in the team.
So I think the Antergos devs also had a problem where people were complaining, filing bug reports, and some of that was getting ignored, especially at the end. So
yeah, that's something we are absolutely not going to do, because we as moderators back then, we got a lot of very, very negative. We got all how do I say this nice, but
you got all the flack.
yeah. And we didn't know anything because the devs didn't tell us anything. And when they told us we're going to stop, this is it, and they made a promise, until this day, Antergos members who didn't cross over to EndeavourOS even ask us, when is the promise? When is this update coming from the Antergos devs? Because everyone thinks we work very close with the Antergos devs, and that wasn't the case.
Mm-hmm. All right. I think it's awesome that you guys are, as someone just said, honest and upfront about what you're trying to do, and the fact that, there will be problems, but that you're working on them. And all I can say is I appreciate all of the hard work that you guys do.
Mm-hmm.
Let me go to Zeb. Did you try EndeavourOS this week?
I didn't, because I've had it on my machine since day one. Now, I won't say day one, because as we know, I have a few problems with my NVIDIA RTX 2080 Ti. And it was one of the new EndeavourOS devs who actually pointed me to a very nice Nouveau page, and it shows all of the RTXs with 3 triple X's all the way down the bottom, saying, yeah, we'll get to it eventually, we'll get to it eventually. So unless you can get the NVIDIA installed right from the beginning, which Brian and his team very kindly did in the Telegram group. So or it might have even been on a Discord, I think. So I jumped on and put it on, and I thought, wow, that was easy. Good grief, this is not Xfce. This looks way too good. And then
yeah.
I did the Arch Challenge eventually, and I've been telling myself for years I'm never going to do it. And now you've got installers like EndeavourOS and Black Labs ALI, and it's not Black Labs, it's I think Black Arch or something.
Yeah.
No, Arch Labs.
Arch Labs, yeah.
ALI installer, which is a slightly different take. But it's the same thing. It just takes you through simple, basic steps, and then gives you a blank canvas from which you can learn. So for me, there's absolutely no need to do it the Arch way anymore. I'll do it the Endeavour way, because it just works. As Derek said, he tried it on VM and on hard metal. I'm not a VM user. I don't like it because for me it just doesn't feel right, which is why I have to install it straight out of the box. But the thing I like about the fact that it's just pure Arch is I can then go to various other resources that I've got around the web, knowing it'll work because it's Arch. So, you know, it's really, really good, and it's stable. It works. The update works. I did a recent couple of videos on YouTube where I had left all of my installs for a week, some of them maybe even 2. And I think not Antigos, Endeavour was left for about 3 weeks. I went there, did the PAMAC, it went straight through, rebooted, carry on. Yeah, it's all working. So yeah, it's a great solid base for somebody to start with, and you're not overloaded with a load of applications that you then got to spend 20 minutes uninstalling.
And
Yeah.
you were talking about driver issues, Zeb. I just want to point this out. It works great on AMD. So I'm just throwing that
Oh,
out
yeah.
there.
Oh, of
Wow,
course.
really?
Yeah.
Team Red. Team Red.
Open source.
Yeah, no, and that's why I specifically said I had problems with my RTX.
Right. Mhm.
Yeah, it's the Ryzen side of it was fantastic. That works, no problems at all.
Right.
Went straight in and changed the make config to the 32 cores or threads, and yeah, it's fantastic. I love it, and it's going to stay on my OS as an example of how Arch should be done.
Nice. All right, Brian, have you heard of this new distro called Endeavor OS, and have you tried it this week?
No. I'm on elementary. Sorry.
Oh, is that what it is? All right, Jill,
Yes.
did you try Endeavor OS?
Oh yes. Oh yes. In fact, I've installed it twice recently because I also did it for my own show, LWW, on Linux Gamecast. So I thought it was wonderful. I really liked Antergos, and Endeavor definitely has the same spirit and the feel, and that's what we want. So that was
Great.
really awesome. And I did a DD install of the live USB ISO, and played around with it a bit, and everything was really snappy. And because I like to also test the live USBs as well. And then I installed it natively. In fact, I installed Endeavor alongside Clear Linux on one of my testing install laptops, and it went really smoothly. I was surprised because I wasn't sure, Clear Linux, how happy, Arch would work with next to Clear Linux, but it did a great job. And I really liked, actually, during the install process, the first question on there is, "Are you afraid of the terminal?"
That gives it its personal touch, and that's what's
Yes.
awesome.
Yeah. So, and you guys, nailed it with that. And, and also after that included info on the wiki and how to contribute, which was wonderful. So I think you covered all the bases during that install. It was really well done. And the only issue I had was, as I partitioned alongside with Clear Linux with the installer, no problem, but it wouldn't initially give me a boot for Clear Linux and for Endeavor. So I just went through and installed Grub and got it all working. So, but I kind of expected that. I'm sure if it was a Debian OS, it probably wouldn't have had an issue, but with Clear Linux, it did.
Yeah. Now, I just want to pick up on that one because, and I'm probably going to get shot down in flames by everybody here, but Clear Linux EFI doesn't work properly with every other distro exactly the same way as Solus doesn't. And that's for one reason.
Very true. Yeah.
Ike Doherty does it the System D way and the System D way only. He won't include any grub shenanigans with System D. And any EFI installer that does that, it won't multi-boot.
Yeah. It definitely has your so on there, Zeb. Yeah. And this was the first time I tested it on UEFI before I had tested installing Endeavor with Ubuntu on with a classic BIOS. So that was no problem, but with this it was. So.
Yeah. But I just want to point out that's a Clear OS problem, not a
Exactly. It's
Endeavour
not an
problem.
Endeavour problem.
Because
Yeah,
for
and I
me,
knew that.
Endeavour do it properly. Everything came up in
Yeah.
the menu. That was fine.
Yeah, so that, once I fixed it with Grub, no problems, and I installed the GIMP and Blender and of course Steam and tested some gameplay, and they ran beautifully.
Well, I did install it on the test machine, and I won't say which OS I blew away on there because that was a big deal last week. But I installed it without any issues, which I can't say that for Intergos, obviously because of the installer. But the one issue that I did have is I set it to auto login, and in the installer, and it does not auto login. Not sure why. I don't know if something wasn't set right. But that is one issue I'm having. But going through the install process was perfect. It has like one of the nicest looking grub screens out there. Mm-hmm. And I didn't have the issue that you're talking about, Jill, because I didn't have ClearOS.
Yeah, you weren't using it.
But everything worked fine on the install for me. So, Yannick?
Cool.
No, I didn't try Endeavour.
Okay. It's no big deal. Peter.
Get off.
Peter.
Okay. I tried Endeavour. It worked fine, installed great onto my Alienware laptop. Beautiful Xfce. I'm an Xfce fan. Really love it. Everything installed fine. I even tried some flat packs. They worked great. Talking about Grub, because it is an older laptop, I do have an eSATA drive that I have other distros on, and Grub Customizer worked great on Endeavour, and it updated Grub no problem to include all the other distros on my external drive, so everything works fine. It's working great.
And is it going to replace Solus?
No, never. Plus Peppermint is second.
Sounds good. Tony, I know you had a bit of a horror story before with Arch, but did you give Endeavour a go?
Yes, I did.
Great.
And was it better?
Yes, it was. I
Yay.
failed to get it to install the first 2 times. That's probably me, as I'm a relatively newbie. But it did install the 3rd time, and I really like the way it looks. I like Xfce, but this is a step above any other Xfce I've tried. Excuse me. I must admit, as a noob, I spent 20 minutes trying to work out how to install anything on it. And then I decided to do the sensible thing and go and look at the website. And then I realized why they say RTFM.
Yes.
That there isn't actually a graphical user interface for installing software. It's command line. And that's not a good thing for a newbie. But having said that, I did manage to change the desktop to Deepin from your website, and that worked perfect, which amazed me because I expected it not to work for me. And then I cheated and I went online and I searched to find out how to install Pamac, and I did what you're not supposed to do, copy and paste into the command line. But I got it installed and I got it working, and I was able to install software. And I've still got it on my test laptop, and I like it so much that I'm thinking of making it my main distro and learning more about Arch and
Awesome.
trying to get it set up the way I normally have my distro set up. I'm afraid at the moment I'm using Linux Mint Cinnamon because it's easy.
And to be fair to these guys about the not having a graphical installer, Arch actually doesn't officially support a graphical installer either. I mean, that's what they're basing off of. So,
yeah, well, I guess they're not aiming it at newbies anyway. It's
well, some people think you can actually break your installation using tools like Pamac rather than updating through the terminal. So maybe that's I don't know.
That's a fair point, but at the end of the day, if you're going to use it, you'd like to be able to install some software.
Yeah.
And I'm not great for doing the command line for that. So I need something that will do it for me. And having used Manjaro in the past, I knew about Pamac and I thought, well, there has to be a way to install it. And so that's what I did. But I think it's great that Antergos is carrying on in a different format as Endeavour. I always had problems with Antergos. I hadn't been able to get it to install on my machines for a long time. I tried it several times and it always failed to install. This was nowhere near as difficult. And it's nice enough for me to want to learn more to perhaps use it.
Well,
Nice.
Yep. And this coming from a distro hopper here. An extreme distro hopper.
Yeah, I changed distros about 5 times today.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that brings up a good point that it's not just about, installing it or getting it installed. If you're going to run any Arch distribution, you should know how to maintain it as well. So
Yes.
Endeavour gets you there to install it, but then it is up to you to learn it so that you can maintain it. Otherwise, you're going to end up with problems down the road.
And I would say even with mainline Arch, installing it is not the challenge. It's after the install that's the challenge, keeping it up and running.
yeah, absolutely.
All right, Matthew.
All right, so taking, I guess, the opposite extreme, and I am the opposite of a distro hopper, really loyal to Fedora specifically. I didn't have any specific troubles installing it, and I was really impressed, and it definitely has a lot of potential as a very popular and helpful operating system. The most picky things I can point out is I don't like rolling releases, which Arch, that's just part of the game, I guess. The thing that caught me off guard from the start was that I had to disable secure boot to get the live ISO to work and install. And again, it's basically a spin of Arch Linux in the most theoretical senses, and I wouldn't expect necessarily for that secure boot to work right at this point, but that might be something to consider perhaps fixing down the road if the operating system starts to pick up steam and things like that. But it's not necessarily as much a criticism as much as it was it was a new experience for me not being a distro hopper, I guess. I'm assuming that's probably something more frequently experienced than I'm like assuming it is or something. But overall, once I got it installed, I got GNOME as the GUI and installed a few apps, LibreOffice, and it worked perfectly for my workflow. So nothing but praise for the operating system in general. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yay.
Okay, Eric, have you got anything to add to the pot?
I really don't. I installed it and played around with it a little bit, but I honestly didn't give it much of a... I want to test it a little more, and since we have 2 weeks now, I'd like to take advantage of that and give a better impression and better feedback to Brian and the team.
That's the whole point of doing the 2 weeks. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. All right. It's okay. So before we go any further, are there anybody that wants to save their comments for next week as well, like Eric did? Dead air again. There was complete dead air again. All right. Derek, I don't know if you're going to make it next week, so I definitely want to get your opinion in. Your overall opinion on Endeavour OS.
Well, other than what I've said, like I said, it was all about the installation, which worked fine for me a couple of different times. I don't often use full desktop environments. I rarely use things like GNOME and Plasma and Xfce. I was shocked when I loaded up the live environment, Xfce, and I saw all that blue and teal coloration and the translucent panel. I really thought I was in Plasma there for about 30 seconds. Until I opened the menu, I was like, this is the Whisker menu. How'd they get that in Plasma? So, so I was really impressed with Xfce and the theming and everything. I know aesthetics they don't mean much, but they mean a lot for first impressions, certainly. So.
Well, they definitely mean something in my book, because that's extra time that you would personally have to take out to customize the desktop to make it look like, okay, so let's be honest, Xfce is not the most beautiful desktop, vanilla Xfce, but then but it's a great desktop environment. It's a great desktop environment to use, but that takes that time away from you where you can just install a system and get ready and get down to business rather than trying to customize it to the hilt. All right. Big Pod.
I don't really have much to say, except that I think that I will have to wait to give my final opinion in a video form until the online installer is done. Then I'll be able to really say what I think about it, because that's one of the main selling points of EndeavourOS for me. Everything in one installer.
Okay, sounds good. And I think we can leave everybody else for next week, Rocco, unless somebody's got a real burning desire to jump on in.
Well,
actually, I'd like to say something if I could.
Do it.
So, Brian, first of all, thanks for being here. I just have a couple comments, and one thing that I've discovered. So I work with a distro that is very famous for its welcome screen. And one of the things that we find is we spend a lot of time. It's Mate, so Ubuntu Mate, and there's a lot of time spent on that welcome screen and the software boutique. But we find, unfortunately, that sometimes all that time that's spent, users just close it, click it, get away from it. I know the Mint guys have the same problem, but the one thing you may want to consider is taking that screen that you guys have on the live boot and just throwing some of that into that first boot up on the install. There's some really good stuff, and I think people like Tony have talked about being new to Arch, and this is a great introduction, but there's that few couple steps that a new user may not see. And I spent a lot of time this week doing other installs, so I didn't get the hugest amount of time. I'm an Xfce fan. This is a beautiful implementation out of the box. Looks wonderful. The biggest issue that I saw for me was that after the installation, when you came to reboot, there was a little box you could check for reboot. I could check that box all day long, and it would never reboot the system. So that that's a little thing that you could look in, and for a really new user, it might be a problem. An experienced Arch user is going to not even have a worry. But this was fast. I think it was 10 minutes, start to finish. And that's like a record for me for anything Arch-based. So you guys have done a wonderful job. You've taken something that was really had a nice community. It kind of got kicked in the teeth. And you have really, really, really done a great job. And I really commend you and the rest of the team for the work you've done.
Thanks. The issues you're referring to are, most of them are handled, are already solved. This Thursday, our next release will come out with those improvements. Nice. Not with the menu screen, because that is a work in progress. And like I said, we're learning on the job. But with that reboot, that was very, very early when the community informed us about that, and it's been resolved.
Awesome. You guys are really doing a good job.
Magnus.
There, can you hear me?
Yeah, now after you unmuted.
Pulse audio.
So are we not going to postpone it for the next week, or?
What do you mean? I jumped the gun. Carry on.
It's all good. We got a few minutes left.
Well, I have just been doing some super extreme distro hopping while waiting for my turn. So I installed it in a virtual machine and just kind of dabbled. I've been dabbling with Arch for a while, and I've never had it on my main system because I just never really wanted to we're away from Debian and that kind of stuff. But then the other day I tried Solus. I think it was related to one of the Bill meetings, and I put it on my laptop, and I'm kind of opening up for new experiences. And Solus is doing such a great job, and now I just tried Endeavor OS, and with Pacman I was able to install all the build tools that I use and all the PyCharm and all sorts of development environments and all that kind of stuff, and that kind of worked. And I installed Flatpak and got Spotify and Discord and all that stuff, and it just works. And I really like this theme, so maybe Endeavor OS is going to be my adventure into Arch.
Yeah,
My
once you
friendly
start
adventure.
hopping, it won't stop.
Well, I might put it on my laptop because Solus is it's so stable and it works so great. It's kind of getting boring. So maybe that's Endeavor OS for my laptop. Might be fun.
Well, we were able to get everybody in an hour. That's amazing, because we don't do that.
Absolutely. But just before we do leave, I've got one question for Brian. Yeah. And when I say leave, we leave the subject, so to speak. Do you distro hop?
I used to.
Mm-hmm.
I used to do it a lot. But I think 3 years ago, I found Antergos, and my distro hopping days were over.
Wow.
I was hooked on Arch, and that was it for me.
I think every distro hopper says they're going to quit distro hopping, but Rocco's quit like 5 times in the past 6
Look,
months.
man, this is why I got a test machine, so I don't have to hop at the main machine. Well, we are going to have a topic later in the regular Biddle show about distros and what you would choose. But Brian, obviously that Antergos is no more. If you didn't have Endeavor OS, what distro would you run?
It would be Solus. I really, really like because
it is great.
Yeah, it's very. They build it from scratch, and I really admire that. And I ran it for a while before I jumped over to Antergos. So, but I really, really like Solus.
Brian, you're excellent.
Thanks.
You are so excellent. Solus is the best.
Yeah.
You're one.
All right. So that is, Doctor, did you want to get in on Endeavor before we leave the subject?
Actually.
All right. Can you do us a favor? Can you mute the stream in the background so we don't hear the feedback?
You want to get in on Endeavor?
Yeah,
I did. I did.
Yeah, Doc, you need to mute YouTube.
There you go.
All right.
That's better.
So go ahead. Go ahead on your questions or your experience.
I tried it, and I tried to install it, and I got a error come up on it, and in the installer, in the Karimari installer, and it's happened to me before, this error, and I couldn't install it. So for me, it needs looking at, and that's what I've been trying to say in the comments.
YouTube text. Oh, right, sorry about that. We're sorry we missed it. Can you remember what the error was?
It just came up, error, could not install, and that was that. And it just wouldn't install, and I was left high and dry without it being able to install. So I'm quite disappointed.
What partition scheme were you using?
I used gparted, and it just wouldn't do it. And it's also done on, dare I say it, on Manjaro as well. The same sort of thing.
Yeah, but which did you use? ext4 or?
Yeah.
Encrypted? Or,
and it just refused to install, and that was that. So I'm quite disappointed, and I downloaded it twice just to make sure it wasn't a fault in the download.
Are you using GPT or MBR?
MBR.
Okay.
does UEFI work with MBR? Was you doing a UEFI install, Doc?
I was just doing a normal install.
Well, when you booted off the live OSA, did you boot it into a UEFI, or did you boot into a regular live version?
Just a regular live. Just a regular.
How old is your system?
How old's my system? Not that old. It accepts a lot of other Arch-based things without any bother at all.
And those other ones that it accepts, are they Calamaris or were they different installers?
Yeah, Calamari installers.
Wow.
But you said it also happened with Manjaro too, right?
Manjaro, which uses the
It's
same.
also with Manjaro. The same error. So what's going on? Is there something coming into Calamari?
I don't know, because I installed Manjaro yesterday or the day before, and it went fine.
Yeah, me as well.
Yeah, I did a Manjaro installation not 2 weeks ago on one of my physical machines as well, and I haven't had any issues with it.
Doc, have you got Telegram?
No, I haven't.
Okay. Any chance you can jump on the Endeavour Discourse website?
Yeah.
And
I reported it. I reported it. I emailed them.
You emailed us.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's my pseudo known as Doc. Doctor 66.
Okay. I shall check the emails, but I didn't receive anything. So maybe something went wrong. Could you join the forum, the discourse forum?
Yeah, I'll join the forum. I'll do anything to try and get it to work for me, because I'll even come on next week and say whether it worked or didn't work.
Okay. Just post it on the forum and we will get back to you.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. That is going to be it for our Endeavour OS partial show. So we are going to talk about Endeavour OS on the regular BDLL program at 8 p.m. But overall, I would say it met with a very good thing from everybody, where everybody kind of had good things to say about it. So high praise for Endeavour OS, and thank you, Brian, for all of the hard work.
Absolutely. Great job.
Thank you. All the love.
Sounds good.
All this good,
Thank you.
all this good feedback make me want to try it. So I'm downloading it right now.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a huge thing, because I usually don't try many distros, but I will try this one.
Yannick's not a distro hopper, just saying.
Oh no. Been an
Thanks,
Ubuntu for ages.
Big Dad. Let me on.
Yep, no problem, Doc. All right, so this week there was another KDE vulnerability, or another vulnerability, I should say, from the KDE desktop, and it was patched within 24 hours of it being put out there. So the security researcher that put this out did not take it to the KDE devs beforehand. He just basically published the vulnerability and then at the same time sent it to the KDE developers, which was probably not the best. It's not probably. That was not the best way to go about that. It should have been pushed to the devs first and then put out to the community itself. But I guess my point about talking about this whole thing is this is a perfect example of running Linux and having a community that cares about security and vulnerabilities, where within 24 hours you have something published and it is fixed within that time period, which is absolutely amazing to me. So what do you guys think about this?
Yes, we're always getting these security alerts, and I think I don't know who the particular guy was who did it this way round, but that was shockingly unprofessional. this might not have been something that could be easily fixed within 24 hours. So here he is telling all the evil people in the world, oh, this is how you can exploit people's computers, without giving them a chance first to fix it. Let them fix it and then tell everybody I discovered this vulnerability and look how great the Linux community is. They fixed it. And I know it's not a very big space of time, but they left us vulnerable for 24 hours. And I think that's totally unprofessional and unforgivable. And does it happen anywhere else? Does that happen on Windows? Do people spout out Windows problems and iOS problems before they tell the devs?
So one of the things you just mentioned, that zero-day vulnerabilities are one of the biggest ways that certain parts of the community can get credentials by releasing zero-day. And this week, there was a very large security conference in Las Vegas. And this KDE vulnerability was released in concert with that conference so that person could present there. But it's not just Linux, it's not just Windows, it's IoT devices, it's networking devices, zero-day vulnerabilities, and that release structure has really nothing to do with the Linux community. That is throughout IT in general. Windows, databases, everything. Zero-day is whether you're going to say it's good or not, that really has no overall effect that Linux is that evil community doing it. It's overall.
But has that fix already been rolled out on all the various distros, or is it still underway? Or
well, I can't say that it's been rolled out to every distro, but the patch was released already.
Right.
So I can't verify every distro that it was released on, especially the ones that don't update quite as fast as something like Arch.
I would expect all major distros should have already pushed it out. So
yeah. Well, I'm not using KDE, but I'm using Qt. Was it Qt related or was it KDE only?
It was actually had to do with the Dolphin File Manager. And it was something that the devs thought basically was a feature that and I know that's a meme right now. It's not a bug, it's a feature, but it was originally intended to be a feature in the Dolphin File Manager, but it obviously got exploited. So. Mm-hmm. And I think that, again, I got to go back to the fact that I don't know if you would get that kind of response in Windows if there was a vulnerability and it was patched within 24 hours.
Well, I do know a lot of people that have reported bugs on things like Windows and, closed source software, for some of these big companies, they'll report it and nothing happens for 6 months, a year, 2 years. And then those guys will go ahead and release it to the public because they're not seeing movement on it. I get why people do that, but this guy didn't even contact the KDE team.
Well,
so his actions made no sense.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, but I think that he is, in hearing conversations and seeing things on Twitter and stuff like that, it seems to me that he is rethinking how he did it. Maybe he didn't think about it when he did it. He did have some rationale on it, but I think he realizes that it should have been put to the devs first now. So
it's a great way to get a lot of attention.
Yes, I mean, that's a part of it, but you got to give the devs time to fix something, especially like that.
Absolutely. And just a quick question, Marco. Was this a feature on Nemo or just Dolphin?
It was a feature on the best file manager on the planet, KDE Dolphin. That's what it was, Zeb. Just saying.
Was the bug in single click or double click? No.
Oh my gosh, really? We're going there.
These exploits are actually very common before DEF CON. This is a thing. Even though it's not necessarily nice, it's a thing.
And what was the big thing I missed last week? And I made a comment in it in the YouTube where it was going to be the next single click, double click. What was it you were discussing last week?
We were discussing when you have to hit shift to get the plus sign.
That's the one. Yeah.
Oh.
No, we're not even going there, Seb. We're not even going there.
Are you talking about zooming in the terminal? Yeah, that's always confused me that the plus and minus, one of them you have to hit shift with. Yeah.
Well, okay, so it's not exactly. We're going to hash this whole conversation out again. It's not exactly. It's not exactly a bad thing. It's just you have to know to do that. I guess some people expect to, if they need to hit plus, they hit the shift automatically.
speaking on my behalf, what I do is, because it's confusing, I remap that to something more sensible, usually like Control Shift J and K, you know, the Vim keys for up and down, to zoom in and out, because I can't remember, do I hit Shift with the plus, Shift with the minus, you know?
It's a little bit like that alt right clicking to resize windows and say Xfce. You kind of just have to know it, that it's there.
Yep.
Right.
Anybody else want to jump in on the 0 day?
Yeah.
Rocco, I did notice 3 days ago in Solus, and Solus does updates every Friday usually, or sometimes Saturday, but usually once a week.
Mm-hmm.
But 3 days ago, there was an update for kconfig. And it was one file, it was one app that got updated, one app only, kconfig. Would that have been it?
Could well have been, but
as far as I remember, yes, kconfig is the file that needs to be, or software needs to be updated for
Okay,
this vulnerability will not be vulnerability.
So there you go. Solus has the latest.
Yeah.
Just saying. Anybody else? 0 day? No. All right, who's breathing into their mic? That's what I want to know.
I think Brian's got some background noise. I don't think he's
Yeah, it
breathing.
sounded like the wind.
Oh yeah, it's storming over here.
All right, so on to the next topic. I have a personal thing right now where I'm trying to kind of downsize my hard drive space, and I have like, I don't know, 4 billion pictures on my computer. And my question is, are there any programs out there that I can use that will look for duplicates
no,
and not cause complete havoc?
don't do it. I'm sorry, there is not a single application out there. They all claim they can do it, and I stupidly ran it once on my music collection and lost about 12,000 MP3s. Because you'll have two photos identical in size, two totally different pictures, and the machine will go delete it. So don't do it.
They hash it or something?
Well, I don't know. Like I said, I'm looking for a program right now that'll be able to do that, because I have folders and folders and inside of folders of duplicates, just because at the time I was trying to make a copy of it, and long story short, there's a billion photos there. So I'm trying to cut down on that, but I don't want to go through every individual photo to see if I got that one.
Well, if the content of the file is the same, you should be able to make a hash list and just, compare that should be possible. Quite easy.
So can you write it for me, Magnus?
Sure. Yeah, definitely. I can do that.
You might have to get photos in different formats, or maybe the size changes.
That's the problem. If it's if they're resized or just a little bit of touching on them, the hash value will change entirely, right?
Yeah, and then they're two different pictures, so it wouldn't catch that, right?
Yeah.
But if they aren't identical, that should work.
I mean, you should be able to write a simple bash script, I think, to execute on that. And
yeah, I can write that. I think it shouldn't take long.
So are you going to keep these offline, Rocco?
Yes, they are offline. I don't put that kind of stuff online. Even though I have backup storage online, pictures are not something that I put up.
No, of course. So
I know
please don't do it.
Well, I know it's a lot of space, but what I would try personally is make a backup of it or an alternate copy of it somewhere.
Oh yeah,
and then run whatever tool you want to try on it. And if it's garbage, then oh well, and then you just, I would probably iterate through and just try a couple either techniques or tools and find one that seems to work.
All right. I can do that. Anybody want to bring up anything before we move on?
So if I was going to make a script for that, so you just want to select like a root folder to branch into and find all the identical files there.
I want a foolproof script that won't delete anything that it shouldn't and work perffically.
Right.
Is that too much to ask?
It'll search through the files. It'll find all the identical files and list them for you. And then you can decide which ones to delete.
Well, I think his problem is he's got so many photos. He's saying he wants something to automatically delete the duplicates, but he wants to make sure they do the right ones. And I don't know how he would go about that. I mean, I think you would.
But you could do like slide them up next to each other. Like if I can do this, I'm gonna do this, Rocco. Don't worry.
Homework assignment.
Next time.
Rule of thumb: never delete
Is
anything.
this going
Move the files away.
Is this going to turn into a Simon Quigley Pulse Audio thing?
Yeah, probably at some point.
Hey,
Somebody's
Rocco.
got to work on this. Yeah.
Rocco, make sure you have a backup before you run that script.
No,
the backup of your
so
backup.
It's gonna be like this. It's gonna search for all the files, find the identical ones, and then it's gonna list them for you and
Well-
show them on the screen. And so you can say, okay, all these 5 files are identical, and then you can, select which one.
That would be good. But see, that is part of the problem with backing up for me. Like, I have backups on the cloud, but I only have partial backups, really, because there's some things I don't want on the cloud, like my pictures. So when you go and you try to back something up, I'm like selecting certain things and then unselecting certain things. And then your backups get fragmented, where some are here and some are there and some are on hardware and some are in the cloud. And it's ridiculous. It shouldn't be this hard. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I do, Rocco, is actually Google Drive. I know it's online, but it does. I use it as a backup, not as my primary. But it does find the duplicates, and it will allow you to keep them private. So that's where I have all my pictures at.
So what you're saying is I should just trust Google.
Yeah.
Don't worry, it's all private.
Yeah, as long as you don't put it on Google. If you put it on Google Photos, then you're lost. But
Yeah, exactly.
But Google Drive will keep those private. I have everything on my Google Drive private.
They will keep 1,000 copies of your files.
Right. They'll keep it private to everybody else, but they have all the access to
They
it.
have all your info. Yes, I've just given up on that.
Well, what does everybody use for backup?
I back up my photos on my NAS, 1 copy, and 1 copy on a private account on Flickr.
Okay, and but you're just talking photos, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, I do. I back up the stuff to my NAS, and then I have a Backblaze bucket that I just dump. I've got like 4 terabytes of stuff up there.
Yeah, for smaller backups, I have my own Nextcloud server. For my videos, because it's such large storage, I do Amazon. I put all my videos in an S3 bucket on Amazon.
I'm just old fashioned. I just stick them on an external USB drive. Plus the usual cloud nonsense. So yeah, all my photos are on the Google Drive, because as Jill said, the minute you put them on Google Photos, even though it's only meant to be you that can get to them, anybody can get to them.
I thought you were going to say you were doing backups on 3.5 inches floppy disks.
3.5 inch floppy. Well, if we go that bad, it'll be 5 1/4. Come on, let's get it right. I remember 5 1/4.
Yeah. Actually, you guys might think I'm still a little crazy, but I still do a lot of my backing up on DVDs, optical media, because they still haven't, they last for years. I have ones from 20 years ago that still work fine. And for my animation business, that's how we always back them up, because, hard drives fail more than CDs do. So in DVDs, it's still, even though, there's not a storage medium yet that can compete with the optical media, with the backup features of optical media and the longevity.
And I think they're saying that Blu-ray is going to last even longer than DVD, isn't it?
Yeah. But it's still, it's still not a sure method, but at least I know that for the last 20 years they work. So
it's strange though, because the last 2 computers I've bought, I didn't buy a DVD drive because I don't use them.
Yeah.
So neither of my 2 oldest computers, or 2 youngest computers, have got DVD drives on them. I'd have to go and get an external.
Yeah. Well, what I do is I copy them over to my server, and I have DVD burners on there.
Cool.
So that works. But yeah, for the animation, for what I'm doing when I'm doing commercials and whatnot, they always want them in DVD format. So that's the optical backup. It's ancient.
Why not?
It works.
Yeah.
All right, so here's a question for you, and please forgive an old man his foibles. Why do you run servers at home? What do you need them for? I've got USB backup drives. What else do I need? Why do I need a server? What do you physically do at home that requires a server other than to
Yeah.
fulfill your geekiness?
Render animation for the industry. Yeah, for when I'm doing commercials and whatnot.
Yep.
And
So your
for,
servers are that much more powerful than your home
Yes.
computer. Yeah. Right.
yes. I
Cool.
have like quad Xeon servers and whatnot over
So
here.
that's almost like a business requirement rather than
Exactly.
a personal requirement. Yeah.
Exactly. I can also do some of it in the cloud, but sometimes that doesn't always work. So because I have a lot of custom plugins I use and whatnot in Blender and Maya and whatnot. So I have my own, backup system here just in case.
Cool.
Yeah, a lot of people have home servers, though. I guess
Yeah.
it depends on what you're doing. I mean, you want to do a media server, or you can
Yeah.
do something like a music
NAS or
streaming
whatever.
server, especially on like Raspberry Pis or other small form factors. You could even set up your own Nextcloud server at home if you
Yeah.
didn't trust web servers. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're great for, high throughput when you need to be doing rendering over Ethernet and whatnot. USB is just not quite fast enough for that.
Well, the other thing that it's good for is a dedicated system versus, so you can run a lot of server processes on a desktop.
Yeah.
Ultimately, if you don't have a stable, like you might be rebooting that desktop, you might be interfering or interrupting processes. So even a low spec dedicated system can run, file network, all that sort of stuff that you might need, and do it in a way that's interrupted and stable.
Yeah.
So for home automation.
Yeah, and Zeb, I actually have a render farm at my house. So because I've had to. And I mean, I've got Blade servers and Dell workstations and whatnot that crunch out those renders.
Jill, you've got everything there. We
I did for over 10 years. I was pretty much doing a lot of freelance animation. So I've done a lot of stuff.
Well, it makes sense to have a dedicated rendering machine.
Yeah.
Yes, it does. That would be, to me, like either having a dedicated rendering machine, or if you just didn't want your files on another server somewhere else, you just wanted them physically at your location. But for me, that kind of like that second one is like way overkill rather than putting it on another hard drive. Like, to me, putting it on another hard drive is way easier than setting up another complete server in your house just for that reason. But for your case, Jill, I think it's perfect.
Yeah, because I'm dealing with terabyte size files, and sometimes I have to do, 4K. I've even done 16K projects where I had to physically split the data on multiple drives and send them to the, like one was Warner Brothers. We sent a bunch of hard drives to.
Oh my!
It's insane.
Well, have you done like any economic evaluations of like hosting from like a render farm from home compared to if you would do it in the cloud?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, it's really actually not cheaper at home in terms of, because you got to buy all the equipment.
Right, and the power. They must use a lot of power.
Yeah, and it uses a lot of power. But yeah, it can be, of course, done faster in the cloud, but there's lots of disadvantages to it. Like when you want to run custom plugins, and I'm going back and forth between many different 3D animation softwares, so I'm not just using one, and that's where there's an issue. If you're just using one program and one plugin, you're fine. But as soon as you want to render, I use RenderMan, and I go from Maya, Blender, Modo to RenderMan, and it gets complicated. And sometimes the online companies that do that, it's too much configuration and too much personalization, because I write a lot of my own scripts as well. So that I need to have done in-house at home.
I would think that networking would probably be a big challenge too, because you're shipping huge files. So unless you had an unbelievable network connection,
and the storage cost for a web server would be outrageous for those.
It is.
Yeah.
It is insane, especially when you're an independent, contractor. It's insane.
You'd go bankrupt trying to store that much data on a web server. Yeah, definitely.
So that's the second time I've heard that servers cost a lot more to run electricity wise.
Mm-hmm.
Surely it's just a PC that does something differently. What's so power consuming? because Ryan was telling us that his electrical bill went up by $100 a month or something crazy when he built this NAS box at home.
Yeah.
So what is it that a server does? That
Well, I have one of mine has 2,500 watts on it. My Deck
Power
Alpha.
supply.
Actually, I'm still using my Deck Alpha as my main server.
Yeah, a lot of systems will have dual power supplies as well.
Yeah.
The fans are running continuously normally, so they're just drawing a lot.
I had to increase the amps in the house and in the garage so that I could run these systems.
Wow. I'll stick with my PC and USB drive. Thanks.
Yeah, I think I'll just get another hard drive.
That's pretty hardcore. Well,
all right. I believe tomorrow is the day that Xfce 4.14 releases.
Correct. Yeah.
So
I'm stoked. I can't
Brian,
wait.
do you foresee any issues with putting that in?
No, I don't think so.
Is it entirely GTK3 now, or does it still have some GTK2 dependencies?
The whole point is it will be GTK3.
Right. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a long time coming, but I think it'll be worth it once it gets here. And,
Yes.
there's this train of thought, about long release cycles to make sure everything is done right. And, like you had said earlier, Brian, that, you guys got lives, you got families. You can't just spend all day long working on this stuff. And the same goes for Xfce. It's a smaller team, and, their whole lives can't be consumed with making all of this. But so they try to do it when they can, and it takes a lot of flack for getting a long release, but in the end, if it works out and if everything goes smooth, I'm okay with that.
Well, I think redesigning, they shouldn't be redesigning the desktop. The way GNOME and Plasma are doing complete redesigns all the time. I like desktop environments like Xfce that really never change, right? Because they have this set of features and it's feature complete, right? There's no reason to throw everything away and just restart from scratch every 3-4 years like some of the other desktop environments.
Yeah, I put Xubuntu on my mother's computer in her summer house, and it was I think it was Xubuntu 14.04, and during all this time I upgraded it from 14.04 to 16.04 to 18.04, and it didn't change, and my mom didn't even notice, and it's just that's awesome, and it's like a really slow PC, cheap, but it just runs really well. So Xfce rocks.
No, I believe when they take that amount of time to push out an update, it must be good. I mean,
It'll be stable. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't expect. I would be surprised if things would break with that update.
Yeah.
I really would be surprised.
Right.
You got that recorded, Rocco? Yeah.
Yep, got it recorded. It's out there. It's not going to break. Your system is be fine. Just update.
So I wanted to go ahead and bring up I think this is interesting news. I'm not sure what people think about this. I wanted to get feedback. So NVIDIA is releasing documentation on their GPUs and providing that openly with an MIT license on GitHub. It's not complete, but it should help further projects like Nouveau. And I'm curious to see, are people thinking this is actually going to help? Is it enough? Is it just a token gesture? I mean, I think it's a step in the right direction, and I hope it does benefit us. Yeah.
Could they make GBM for NVIDIA and get Wayland working? That would be awesome.
I'm not, I'm not a developer. I don't really know what's out there in terms of the documentation. Hopefully this opens a window into, how to interact with the hardware better, and that the Nouveau team can do that.
I don't think they'll do that though, Magnus, because haven't they already had a split that they've gone their own funny way on Wayland or something?
Yeah, the EGL streams.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think
that would be a huge U-turn for them to suddenly change around now. So yeah,
it would be, but it's not something that couldn't happen. Because you would, a year ago, would you have thought NVIDIA would be releasing anything on GitHub. So I don't know if it's something that they were. Is it something you think they were forced into doing because of a company like AMD, or is it just that they really do care now to release that stuff? Because this is not a small feat to release this stuff on GitHub. I mean, this had to take a long time to prepare to make sure everything was just so.
I think they realized it was about time they did, because AMD, in that respect, are getting so far ahead of them. Yes, AMD now have their own little problems where all of their drivers in the kernel, and if you're on an 1804, you're not getting the latest kernel, therefore you're not getting all the latest drivers. But that's a different issue. Everybody's now talking about maybe AMD should be putting out their binary drivers externally to the kernel so that people can upgrade them sooner. But I think this is pressure from AMD to do the right thing. I don't think they've suddenly gone, oh, we love Linux. Because if they'd have said that, they'd have done it years ago. This is a company driven by profit. I mean, look how much they charge for their best graphics cards. You're still going to pay $1,200 for a premium 2080 Ti. That's where I went for the cheaper version that only cost $950 or whatever it was. But yeah, it's a step in the right direction, but it's not. I don't think it's through love of Linux. It's pressure from AMD.
I think if it could improve the experience for someone like me that has a hybrid graphics card on my laptop, where even now, if I put a 1904 release in, before that NVIDIA driver is installed, the system will hang if I try to reboot. It'll hang if I don't use the right boot option. So I'm still having problems right now, with even the latest releases and the most up-to-date Nouveau drivers. So even if we got a little further along where the hardware compatibility worked well enough out of the box, and then you maybe for better performance, just like they do with AMD, maybe there's something specific that you need that proprietary driver, if maybe Nouveau is not going to be as good for gaming or something like that. But even if it just gave me that out of the box experience and enabled the hardware to work better, I think that would be a step in the right direction.
So go on, Brian. I was going to just.
Now, do you really think? It would be great for the Linux community, but Apple dropped NVIDIA years ago because they were very close. If you look at their MacBook, at their Mac line from 2009 till 2011, it was all NVIDIA, and Apple dropped them because they were too dependent on what NVIDIA was bringing into the game, because Apple really wants to make it their own. Don't you think that is also the reason why they're doing this, to get back to Apple?
Well, I think it's public pressure too. What you're talking about, Apple and Linux and even Windows. When you have Intel and AMD pretty much open sourcing all their drivers, NVIDIA is the only one that's closing everything off and not letting the community work on an open source driver. So I think some of that is the pressure from the community.
Well,
they can lose a little bit of market share every day to AMD because of that.
And you've got Intel that's going to jump into dedicated GPUs, and Clear Linux, which is out there. I don't think that's a coincidence. So I think, maybe the GPU isn't going to be focused on gaming necessarily, but it could certainly be focused on AI or other intensive processing tasks. So I think NVIDIA is probably facing a more diverse competition than they have for a very long time. And this could just be a way that they're trying to ingratiate themselves or make themselves more relevant.
Let's hope that Intel get the base design right. And in 10 years' time, we don't end up with another raft of holes that they forgot. Oh, that won't happen. People will never have 1 terabyte of memory on their graphics card. It will never happen. So it will never be exploited. So let's hope they get the base design right first. But while we've got a developer in the house, what I'd like to ask is, what is so difficult for a distro? Bearing in mind that whether people like it or not, we still have 60% of the market as NVIDIA. Why can't people just include the NVIDIA driver with the ISO?
It's tough to do it.
Is it?
It's really tough. Yeah, it is.
You guys did it in half a day for me.
Yeah.
Unless you have been working on it already.
But we had to make a separate ISO for it. Because the problem is when we include it and users don't have a NVIDIA card, it won't boot up.
Right, you're just getting a black screen at that point.
Yeah. And
like with
I mean,
they also have
Manjaro is very. They have hardware detection, and we're not there yet. But it's really tough for to get NVIDIA working when you need it.
Yeah, and like Pop! OS did it by separating it. You can
Yeah.
download the
Yeah.
AMD or the NVIDIA, and I thought that was brilliant.
So how do Manjaro do it? Because in Manjaro, when you first boot it up, you've got those 5 questions. Are you UTC or whatever? What's your language? Do you want the free or non-free? So if they can build it into an ISO, what's...
Yeah, that's the part we can't look into.
Oh, is that their own proprietary stuff?
Yeah.
Wow. So, okay.
Yeah, I know Pop! OS had to get permission from NVIDIA to do that.
And even when you boot into a live environment in Manjaro, like if you're booting off the ISO, you have the options of booting with the free drivers or the non-free drivers. So,
And are you really saying, Brian, that part of their bootloader is not open source?
Yeah. Well, I'm not entirely sure, but I know that Arco Linux has the same problem.
Yeah.
And I mean, but we're not the only ones. So they're doing something that isn't
obvious.
Yeah.
Because I had a really fantastic week that week, because not only did you create that NVIDIA ISO for me, but so did Eric Dubois. So I could get Arco Linux installed. So that was just,
nice.
I had an amazing week before I went on holiday. It was fantastic.
Oh, great, Seb.
So I have a question for you guys. We got an email from one of the listeners about problems with a Wacom tablet and mouse. And he has a Wacom ZC10000 mouse that he can't get the back buttons working in Linux. And he's having issues, so he's looking to upgrade. And I don't know if there's a way we could get the back buttons working with that, with Linux. But he was looking for suggestions on companies that offer keyboards and mice that are basically guaranteed to work with Linux.
Well, I know Red Hat has spearheaded. They're the ones who kind of started getting those devices working. And I've had good luck with my Bamboo tablet under Red Hat. But sometimes there's issues with it on Ubuntu.
I have a niece that bought a Wacom tablet about a month ago and was trying to use it on an Ubuntu installation that I'd set up for her. And it didn't recognize it out of the box. I had to do some research about this particular brand of tablet. And I think I had to compile a new kernel on that install. I spent like 2-3 hours, and I was actually able to get that tablet to work, but it wasn't easy. It's not something most people are going to take the time to do, to be honest.
Yeah.
So you do need to be careful and do some research before you buy the hardware. Make sure it's actually going to work for you before you have to jump through the kind of hoops I had to jump through.
Well, if somebody asked you guys what you would recommend buying as a keyboard and mouse for Linux, what would you say?
Well,
for me, Logitech all the way.
I never had any problem with any of the Microsoft hardware.
Really, Yannick?
Yes. Really. I absolutely hate their operating system, but you have to admit that their hardware is, it's great.
I'll give you that.
Their peripherals, their peripherals are really good.
Yeah, Nick, the funny thing that you say that is there is actually an open bug now that we've gone to 5.0 in the 1803 kernel stack for actually Microsoft specific peripherals, and they work fine with Logitech. It's just actually really funny. But
you heard it here live on Big Daddy Windows Live.
Yeah, and I've had no problems with Wacom tablets with Logitech hardware as well. under
Logitech
Ubuntu.
is what I use. So
Well, I love Logitech products. That's exactly what I use and prefer. But it's kind of like their software doesn't work on Linux because they don't develop anything for Linux. There are side projects that try to get the buttons working the way you want to, so you can remap them, and so you can get your RGB lighting to work if that's what you choose to buy. But their specific software is not developed for Linux. So are they the best? Are they the best company for Linux?
They did just do something, and I apologize, I don't have the exact details, but I know they did something where, at least the kernel devs did something where they can interpret the signals from the mouse and apparently catch different events. And so it should be now easier, I think, to actually access the hardware and use map buttons and do all that sort of stuff. I don't know if that is going to work for the like LEDs and stuff like that, but I know I read about that about a month ago. I'm blanking on the details a little bit, but I think peripherals are a personal thing, right? I mean, I might like a mouse that fits my hand well or has the right layout or whatever, but if it doesn't work, what good is it?
Yeah, I've had actually also good luck with Corsair and Razer because there's third-party softwares for a lot of the more mainstream products that work with the RGB keyboards and mice, and those have been really good. Also, Rocat is another good brand for that.
Rocat definitely works with Linux.
Yeah.
To my knowledge, Razer products usually require online a setup, which I guess is good for one thing, but if you'd like to keep off,
you can, but you don't need to do that. I had
no, you don't have to, but if you want to like customize the
well, actually, the Razer one, there's one on GitHub actually that works really, really well. I used it for like 6-7 years. I was using before I started doing my show. I had my my blue click keyboard, and it was too loud for the show, so I had to ditch it and get a brown switch. So
I guess the only thing they can really do is to do a research, get it down to the best 3 products, order it. Oh, that doesn't work. Return it. Order the next one. Oh, that doesn't work. Not that I'm advocating you do that to poor old A at all.
No, no, not at all.
And do a little bit of research online. Usually, you can find, particularly with mainstream products, you can find information. Does this work on Linux? Can you map buttons and all that sort of stuff? I dare say Reddit is actually a decent place for that.
Really?
It really is.
Yeah, you can find good information on Reddit.
Yeah,
and make sure you buy from a reliable supplier, so you don't have any problems.
Well, all you have to do is search Logitech G502, and you'll find the best mouse ever made. So there you go.
603, 603, baby, right here.
No, but the one problem that I do have with the Logitech, so if you boot into that other operating system that we were talking about earlier, you can remap the buttons, and it does have onboard memory, so you can easily switch the profile when you're on Linux to have them buttons remapped. I just would like to see it happen in Linux, and I know there is certain projects, and I can't remember off the top of my head what the name of it is, but they are working on that, but it's not complete. Like, it's not just dead simple to say remap this key. Yeah, just map this key to this button. It's just not dead simple. So
yeah.
So there you go. There is our Roger. There is our take on what you should buy. Just buy Logitech. There you go, and it'll work fine. All right, we got 15 minutes, maybe less. Who wants to bring up something?
What about Linux journal closing? Again.
Yes.
That was definitely a shock to a lot of people, I think, because when you have something that is that big of a production, and then you close it and you reopen it, it's not, you don't do that with just on a whim. You don't reopen it like on a whim and say, oh yeah, we're going to try this again.
Even the writers and the people who worked on Journal didn't know about it until they received the email, you're fired. So, or not fired, but you don't have a job.
Laid off. Yeah.
Okay.
It was owned by PIA.
Really?
Yes.
They bailed them out last time round.
I did not realize that.
Yeah. And, I've become really close to all the writers there because of my show, because we use the Linux Journal like almost in every show for, our articles to draw from and like Catherine Dreckman and Doc Searles, they do also a podcast together that they're going to be continuing. But I was so depressed. I was that was really, really, I was really depressed about that. So I'm hoping that I'll get work elsewhere or continue in another form.
Definitely.
Well, that just goes to show the diversity of it, because I was just about to say, okay, yes, it's not great, and it's not great for the people who work there, but how many times do you see, or did you see, the Linux Journal retweeted or used as a source of information? Certainly, it's not a name that leapt out at me. And when everybody said, "Oh, the Linux Journal," I had to actually go and look it up and see what it was, because up until that time, I had never heard of it. And how many tweets did you see? How many? I mean, everybody knows Frostbites because they don't stop writing rubbish, but that's beside the point.
My gosh.
It was never sort of copied as a definitive source, unless I'm looking in totally the wrong places. And obviously, Jill, you and your team used it a lot.
I was very active with. Well, Linux Journal was the very first Linux magazine available in the stands in the 2000s, and I'd been a subscriber since then. And then they come to scale every year, so I get to talk to them and become friends with them. And so for me, we were always going back and forth a lot, and I was seeing all their tweets, them and Xfce and OMG Ubuntu, of course. But yeah, I was getting a lot of their tweets. But yeah, they were really making an effort to do more with the social networking. But yeah, they were trying to bump that up.
Is that
You're right.
Sorry, Joe.
No problem. Go ahead, Frank.
So they were one of the original print media.
Correct.
Created by Bob Young, one of the founders of Red Hat.
And when it's sort of, that whole print media thing has had the issues that it's had throughout, not just IT print media, but print media in general. And when they got rid of the print media portion of Linux Journal, I don't know if they did quite as well in adapting to the internet culture, where stuff like OMG Ubuntu and some of the other things where they were more on Twitter.
Started on the internet.
And I mean, it was one of the defining journals, that and Sysadmin magazine, which folded, I guess, 10 years ago, were two of the defining journals that I could look at for Linux and IT information, and now both of those are gone.
Yeah. For me, part of the reason I was sad about it is that's how I got into the Linux community, was because of the Linux Journal and the conventions, because they announced the conventions, and it's how I found out about Scale. And and so for me, it just, I actually cried.
Well, according to Michael Tennell, we all know that he's always right. The Linux Journal was started in 1994.
Yes. And I've been, since the 90s. Yeah.
And you can reach that on tuxdigital.com/Linux Journal.
Right, exactly.
That was it. I subscribed in the early 2000s, but I'd been buying it in the store before that, at the local bookstores every month, just waiting for that magazine in college years.
All right, we're going to take the last couple minutes and go back to Endeavor OS and you, Brian, just to close out the show. What is it that you need as far as contributions?
At the moment, the help in the community, help for the development on the ISO. That is at the moment the most priority, because our team is so small, and we really want to expand our team. So please, if you know any coding and if you'd like to help us, join us on GitHub. That's where we're the most help. And we get a lot of questions about donations. We're working on that. But at the moment, financially, it's covered. the ISO and the development of it is at the moment our priority.
All right. And what do you say the ultimate goal is, or where do you want to see Endeavor OS a year or two from now?
To have the same dynamic community it has now, but bigger and a more mature, mature distro with things to make it easier for people to install it. That's the goal for now. We're not trying to be the new Manjaro or to be the new Arco Linux or whatever. The community is the center, is the heart of this distro. I mean, there are a lot of Derek mentioned it on his channel a few times. There are a lot of Arch-based distros, and we know we're not offering something that's really, really unique. We know that. The most unique part is our dynamic community.
Well, I think that's an amazing thing that a distro would highlight the community as being the biggest part of it, because that just simply does not happen. Yes, the community is a big part in distros as far as they try to make it a big part. But this is what you're saying is this is the biggest part of Endeavor OS, and I think that's awesome.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, if you look at a distro like Arch Labs, for instance, they're doing a very, very great job. And I like to see Endeavor OS a bit in the same street as Arch Labs is. I mean, Arch Labs is a fantastic distro, but they have the same problem like we have. I believe it's only 2 people who are maintaining it, and the last update was in January, and they explained it. They have lives, and I believe one of the main developers has more responsibility on his job. And that is something we really want to avoid. And that's why I'm almost begging the community, please help us on the development of the distro.
Well, I think we're in a good place right now with Linux. We have your team working on Endeavor. Arco Linux is another fabulous distro that aims to teach people how to use Arch. And this didn't happen years ago. Like, this was not available. And if you wanted to learn Arch, you learned it basically the hard way. And I think it's awesome that we have people like yourself and Eric over at Arco that just want to help people learn how to take care of their computer.
Yeah, thank you.
Anybody have any questions before we go that they want to get in? Statements?
No, I don't think so.
Well, I think it's kind of interesting that on Linux we now kind of have this layered design of operating systems, a bit like the way that people have always said that good software should be layered design and built up of small parts that eventually, form a bigger whole. And I think that's amazing that Arch is kind of like the foundation for such a lot of other distros, like a little bit like Debian and Ubuntu, and then Pop OS, and it's kind of I don't think it exists that way other places. I mean, BSD is a little bit different, but I think it's amazing and like layered operating system designs that only exist, I think, in the Linux world that way.
Yeah. All right, and on that, we are going to give everybody their last word. Zeb, last word.
Even though I haven't been on for a couple of weeks, and I'm not going to be on for a couple of more weeks because I've got other commitments on Sunday, please don't forget to watch Destination Linux. Ryan and Noah and Michael are doing a sterling job. They had a great interviewer come in, or a guest presenter come in Wendy.
Yep.
And I believe there's going to be another guest presenter on Sunday, and you'll have to wait and see who that is, but I'm sure they'll do a fantastic. In fact, I'm actually worried, should I actually come back, because I might get booted off because they'll just have guest presenters. but catch it. I just thoroughly enjoy it. It's a great show. And as always, Rocco, thank you for doing Biddle Europe. It saves me. Hang on, no, it doesn't, because I'm going to be up.
You're going to be up anyway.
It saves normal people having to stay up until 1 a.m. in the morning to catch your show. So I really appreciate it. You doing this every second Saturday in the month. It's fantastic. Thank you.
Awesome. Brian, last word you want to say to everybody?
Thank you for the incredible love you gave us. That really, really helps us. And I want to thank every YouTuber and blogger over there for giving us and podcaster, of course. Don't forget Jill. We're so grateful for the love and attention you gave us. Thank you so much.
Nice. Jill, last word.
Oh, well, we are honored, Brian, that you came on Biddle. This is awesome. I was so excited when I found out you were coming in. It's so cool. And again, I just want to reiterate that your implementation of Xfce is bar none for any distro. It is beautiful. I love it. And thank you again to Rocco for such a wonderful show and doing the European edition so I can join in.
Yes, because you can't join in on the regular show.
Yeah.
I get it.
I will, but I will once in a while. I'll come in.
Let's hope.
If the other boys will let me go.
Right. Maybe they can have a guest presenter.
Cool.
All right, Yannick, last word, brother.
Thanks, Rocco, for this show, for the main one, and this one, the European edition. Thank you, Brian, for all the work you do for the Linux community. I have downloaded EuroOS during the show, so I'm going to try that tomorrow on my test machine. And well, I hope I will be able to join next month on the European edition. Thanks again, Rocco.
Peter, last word, brother.
Well, Zeb just gave me a heart attack because I was watching on YouTube when you did the whole point down, and it's not me. I am not the.
Oh, because
What's that, Zeb? Thanks again, Rocco. Thanks for Zeb. Thanks for the whole show. I should not be on tonight, but I'll see you next week.
Okay. Tony, last word, brother.
As always, Rocco, thanks for doing this EU version. It's a much more sensible time for me, although I'll probably still be here later.
You will be.
I'd like to say thanks to Brian for a wonderful startup with Endeavour, and I'm sure you will continue to endeavour to make it better.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Someone
Michael Tennell would be proud.
Somebody had to do it.
Good fun, Tony.
And Rocco, I really enjoying the spotlight as well, even though you might not have liked my comment last week, but we'll gloss over that.
We'll gloss over that one, Tony. Don't mention it.
But no, it's really good, and I look forward to seeing more of those. And I wish everybody the best, and just let's all keep going.
Matthew, last word.
All right. So thanks, Rocco, for doing the 3 p.m. It's a lot better time slot for me. I'm usually busy in the evenings. Thanks, Brian, for coming on, talking with us about Endeavour OS. It's been awesome talking with actually the developer of it. And then on my final words, Sean Powers, one of the members of Linux Journal, he has a GoFundMe page because everybody got kind of canned so abruptly. There are three members in particular. They're trying to help just financially. If you want to go and give what you can for the cause, I'm sure they'd appreciate it. It's a legacy of the Linux community that's very long-lasting and hopefully will be remembered for a long time. But go check it out if you want to donate to help them stay in the Linux community and keep providing good content. Anyways, thanks for having me on.
Matthew, if you have a link you can post in the Zoom chat, we will post it on the YouTube chat.
I will send it to you
Okay.
right away.
Eric, last word?
Rocco, I just heard some troubling news. I heard that you were being picked on for saying "wooder."
We're not going to talk about that, Eric.
Okay, you and I need to talk about that because I'm a little upset about it.
Demonetized.
People, backstory, people were making fun of me because I say water instead of water. I guess that's how you would say it. I say water.
It's that area of the country.
That's just the way I say it. That's the way I've always said it. So there you go. You can
Anyway.
make fun of me all you want. Go ahead.
Sounds like a video for Michael. How to pronounce water.
I asked him to actually make a video on how to pronounce that. So,
what can I say? I love having a different time slot and seeing some new faces, different faces, and I'm glad I was able to join today and see everybody. And it's a shame that maybe I won't see some of you until next month.
Big Pod, last word.
Thank you, Rocco, for hosting this Europe edition, and thank you, Brian, for joining us today. And as I said, I will hold my opinion till I see online edition of EndeavorOS.
All right. Bill, last word.
Rocco, thank you for doing this. Brian, thank you for being here and taking the time to talk to everybody. I just wanted to do a little bit of a thing. Chicken made a posting about motivation, and Rocco did a tweet where he retweeted that. And if you take the time and go look for Rocco or Chicken on Twitter, you should take a look at that posting. There's some really good information that everybody should read and think about.
Yep, I agree. It was a fabulous article that Chicken wrote, that he wrote, and I think everybody should probably read that, and I will put a link in the YouTube chat. So there you go. Magnus, last word.
Thank you, Rocco. Great to see you all, guys, and thank you, Brian, for expanding my horizon. And yeah, great.
All right, Derek, last word.
Well, thank you, Rocco. My Saturdays have been busy at work here lately. I know I haven't made one of these in a few weeks, but the early time was great for me this week. So yeah, keep the Europe editions coming. Brian, keep going with Endeavor. Great job so far. I can't wait to check out future releases. So good job, brother.
Thanks.
All right.
Yay, Brian.
Harris.
Thank you very much for the stream, and thank you, Brian, for coming on talking about Endeavor. I also want to say that I appreciate that Endeavor is trying to limit their scope, because that's always a problem with any distro, getting overburdened with everything to keep maintaining. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, that wraps it up for the BDLL Europe edition. We will be back on in less than 3 hours for the regular edition, if you'd like to join us. And I want to say again, I know it's been said, but thank you, Brian, for all of the hard work, you and your whole team.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Until next time, long live Linux.
Yay, we love you.